Hi, I'm Joe Carrero. Is anybody out there shocked about the exposure of Charlie Rangel and Maxine Waters and a host of other recent abuses of power of those in Congress? Now, don't expect anything too serious to come of it except for a slap on the wrist, because you have to understand that those on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, aren't going after one side without pointing a finger at those in their own party. That's why things like nepotism and the corruption it leads to is tolerated. Because if you doth protest too much, eventually someone will protest against something you or your close political colleagues are doing, and then the whole house of congressional cards will come falling down. And nepotism happens everywhere at all levels, so that eventually everyone becomes involved in either its perpetuation or its cover-up. It's prevalent in all government and certainly influences whether bills are passed or killed and what and how money is being spent. It even happens to me. I remember one year my secretary for the legislative session didn't show up, and I asked my daughter to work for me for those 60 days. If that was nepotism, somebody forgot to tell my daughter. She was paid about $10 an hour and put in about $30 worth of work, according to her. Well, she was working for a senator dad, and of course the combination of him being demanding and her being conscientious caused for the government to benefit. Of course, she was sent home on her first day on the job to change the clothes she was wearing that she said were age appropriate. I don't know if I could get away with that on a normal government hire, but admittedly, even in such an emergency, hiring her was probably the wrong thing to do, because if you can justify a little bit, eventually you can justify a lot. In some cases, it leads to elected officials having their families indirectly becoming involved in deciding how they were going to vote, which sometimes comes in conflict with the best interests of the constituents. But as with so many things in government, what goes on is so isolated from public view and no one seems to care. And if they can openly get away with it in the Congress of the United States, why can't they get away with anything on the state and local level as well? Oh, and like I said, it's on both sides of the aisle, with Democrats and Republicans participating. And that's why nobody complains. I mean, if someone complained about me hiring my daughter as a secretary, I would have complained about all the sons and daughters and wives and husbands and cousins hired in agencies and as lobbyists, hidden from view but actually influencing the way the government was run. Of course, in Congress, it's even a bigger deal. On one side, you can have Scott Hatch, son of Republican Orrin Hatch of Utah, lobbying for the makers of ephedra, while his father sponsored legislation to exempt the diet supplement from federal regulation. Scott was paid $2 million for his hard work and efforts. On the other side, you can have the three sons and a son-in-law of Democrat floor leader Senator Harry Reid from Nevada, who lobbied promoting federal land swaps, mining interests, and for the University of Nevada. When Republican Dennis Hastert of Illinois became Speaker of the House, his son Joshua closed his record store back home, moved to Washington, and joined a lobbying firm. Google, realizing his newfound talents, hired him as a lobbyist. Republican Senator Trent Lott's son, Chet, managed pizza restaurants and played polo before becoming a telecommunications lobbyist, with his father immediately taking a keen interest in phones and eventually becoming a lobbyist for those phone companies himself when he retired, getting paid $50,000 a month so far this year to help formulate a new telecommunications bill. Then there's the family of former Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle of South Dakota. That includes his wife Linda, an aviation lobbyist, his daughter-in-law Jill, a lobbyist for companies like Aetna and Blue Cross, and his son Nathan, a former labor union lobbyist. By the way, Mrs. Daschle and Mrs. Bingaman, wife of Senator Jeff Bingaman of New Mexico and chair of the Senate Energy Committee, were considered two of the highest paid lobbyists in D.C. Ann Bingaman was the lead lawyer in the antitrust division of Clinton's Department of Justice before becoming Global Crossing's main Washington lobbyist. Remember Global Crossing? It was every bit as corrupt as Enron, although few in the press mentioned it since so many political types were involved. Democrat National Committee Chief Terry McAuliffe made $18 million off of a $100,000 investment, but when the company went bust, the only ones that got hurt were the average Joes who didn't get the memo about getting out in time. Abigail Pearlman, before she became Republican Congressman Roy Blunt's wife, was Director of Federal Government Affairs for Altria Philip Morris. While Blunt was dating Abigail, he drafted language to benefit Philip Morris and tried to sneak it in the bill that established the Department of Homeland Security without even alerting the Republican leadership. Blunt's goal was to minimize the sale of cigarettes on the internet, thus helping Philip Morris. Fortunately, Leader Hastert killed the amendment, probably because his son was too busy working for Google and wasn't hired by Philip Morris. Then there were at least 64 members of Congress who used campaign funds to pay family members, including California Republican Congressman Jerry Lewis and Howard Buck McKean. According to the study, Republican McKean's campaign paid his wife over $111,000 in salary and an additional $10,000 for reimbursements, which probably included taking her husband to lunch. And after the campaigns, Republican Congressman Jerry Lewis employed his wife, Arlene, as his chief of staff at a salary of over $111,000. Of course, the executive branch is even worse, and the Bush administration made nepotism an industry. Julie Myers, head of Customs and Immigration Enforcement, was the wife of the Chief of Staff of Homeland Security and the niece of the Air Force General Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Elizabeth Cheney, of course, the daughter of Vice President Cheney, was Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, and her husband, Philip Perry, is Chief Counsel for the Office of Management and Budget. Bush named Elaine Chao, the wife of Republican Senator Mitch McConnell, as his Labor Secretary. Labor Department Solicitor Anthony Scalia is the son of Supreme Court Justice Antonia Scalia. Sometimes the name gives it away. George H. Bush's nephew, John M. Walker, is a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals. Former Bush Secretary of State Powell's son, Michael, was named chair of the Federal Communications Commission. And then there are those who trade their good fortune of being a member of the executive branch inner circle to use their networking to find even better jobs in the private sector, which obviously wouldn't have been there for them without their friends at the White House. Ari Fleischer quit as the president's press secretary, and when I heard from his associates about the possibility of them becoming lobbyists for the then unfriendly Venezuelan government, I was shocked that he would give up such a job. They told me that it was time to make some money, and they were asking their prospective clients for a lot more than you would imagine someone with the background of Ari Fleischer could before he became a press secretary. I told them that I would have done the job for free, but in Washington, it really is all about the money. When he became governor of Alaska, Frank Murkowski had to decide who should finish his 2 years remaining on his U.S. Senate term. After an exhaustive search, he looked around and noticed his daughter, Lisa Murkowski, who he then appointed as his replacement. Chief Justice William Rehnquist's daughter, Janet, was appointed Health and Human Services Inspector General until she left in a scandal. But it took a federal investigation and confidential leaks to the media to finally get rid of her, because nobody in the Bush administration wanted to fire the child of the Chief Justice on a Supreme Court divided 5-4 on so many important issues. Of course, most of the real benefits of nepotism don't even occur in the dim light of Congress. But those relatives still have to show results. And if you don't think that those in Congress aren't expected to come through for their supporters of their families, just look at the Susan B. Komen Race for the Cure Foundation dealing with cancer, and their move to dump Joe Lieberman's wife as its global ambassador, saying Hadassah Lieberman's healthcare lobbying work and her husband's opposition to the so-called public option make her unfit for the job. And could you imagine what she was getting paid working for the cancer cure when she also made over $340,000 for speaking engagements around the world? So now this former pharmaceutical lobbyist, wife of a senator, is being attacked by high-profile celebrities demanding that no more money be raised for cancer treatment be given to Hadassah Lieberman until Senator Lieberman changes his mind on his health care vote. So if you're still having problems understanding what's happening in Washington, just check out the money that's coming into these politicians and their families. That's why they vote like they do, and that's how they get away with it. And if you don't do something about it right now, the worst is yet to come. And thanks for listening to An Average Joe.